Bon dia, Yiva Cordia. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat 150, where I'm in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And as is customary, I begin with a prayer for peace. Gomara Shiakon, a Fudna Krinya. Gomara Shiakon in our Jaili agus in our Jira. Gonari Lin, Lenakridge Garmaka. Gamich Buikas Jeev, Jea Chufdaka, is Spirit Chufdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. For peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the holy mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So let me see where everybody is tonight. Hello, Pat from Ulster, Ricky from London, Liz from Wyoming, Penzance, Southern California, wonderful, beautiful, just lovely, and Durham, wonderful to see you all. Let me see a few more people. Castlegar in Canada, not Ireland. Wonderful to see you all here. It's absolutely beautiful on the longest day. I think the solstice, they say now, is kind of started in the next few minutes. And it's been a sunny day. It was 23 degrees in Ireland, which is hot for us, and really nice evening. So Belgium, wonderful. Calgary, hello from Oxford. Oh, it's sunny in Calgary. That's good. New York, wonderful. Hertfordshire, New Forest in the UK. Plymouth, Washington State. Pacific Northwest USA, Missouri, Wales. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Well, we're going to the UK this evening. We are going to London, to Finsbury Park. Hello, and I'd like to introduce Chris Daniel. You're so welcome. I only know Finsbury Park as a stop on the tube for me. I've never been to Finsbury Park.
I don't think that you're not unusual in that. And I mean, it's just another London park. We're blessed by big city standards with plenty of parks. So you're just, the fact you haven't been to this one, I mean, you're in Kilkenny?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
I, to my shame, haven't been there. So I haven't been to the whole place. You just haven't been to this little part of London. So you're winning on that
one. Anyway, just tell us about Finsbury Park, your background.
Well, I mean, my background is not here. My background is somewhat peripatetic, but I would say, I mean, I've lived in London for 20 years now, so I'm a Londoner if I'm anything. And where I am now, I am in the ground floor of an old Victorian house, the kind of house that was built as a grand house on the edge of a park 100 and something years ago, and then in the 1980s was divided haphazardly into flats, and it goes through its life in the city this way that these places see us coming and going. And I've been here only for a year, but I've planted one tree, which I think is important to say in this company. And yeah, hasn't been 23. I mean, it's been warmer in Ireland. Well done. It's been about 22 here, blue skies. I was out on my bike on my way home. It's been great.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So where do you hail from originally? I mean, you said peripatetic, but I mean...
Yeah, well, I'm from the south of these islands. So okay. I did my genetic tests recently, and unlike American friends of mine who have something wonderfully from everywhere, I'm 100% from the south of Ireland and the south of England. So a grandmother from Kerry married a grandfather from London. A grandmother from Tipperary married a grandfather from somewhere I don't entirely know in England. And one family moved to India, one family moved to Kenya. So I was born in Berlin. So I'm an unusual mix of, but entirely from these isles genetically.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And do you have any connection with India or Africa, or Kenya?
With Africa, well, my mother was raised there, and I have actually it's North Africa, sorry, not Africa, northern Tanzania in East Africa. I have a brother who lives in Tanzania on the slopes of. He lives in Arusha and has a farm on the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro.
Well, you know, I have a house in Arusha.
I do, and I think maybe you'd have, when you actually told me, and I remembered, and I loved hearing that. Yeah, so I do need to put you in touch for next time you're over there.
Oh, just wonderful. No, you can see daylight coming through the bits of wood. It's
well, that's like my flat in Finsbury Park. I mean, that sounds like a London flat, so we're fine.
It wouldn't meet with regulations here, I'm telling you. But
I'm not sure my flat in London would either, but that's the state of the building stock in the city.
And your mother was brought up in Kenya, so I lived in northern Kenya in the early 80s.
Yeah,
and Turkana
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, that 20th century relationship as someone ethnically white with Africa. It's a great honor to be part of that history, but also there's a challenging path to it, I find.
Indeed. And I suppose my relationship with Africa was very different to having been a fellow colonized. It was just very, very different. But yes, and I still have strong connections there through Tanzanian friends there. Yeah.
I mean, the relationship, here I am sitting on the internet now, talking about them as a white man, talking about the relationship with colonization. It's a challenging topic, but one that I feel I have to maintain dialogue with and listen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so tell us a little bit about so you're a Druid.
That's lovely to hear you say so. I will take that from you.
Okay.
I've been called a bard on occasion, but it's wonderful to be called a druid.
Well, if you're on the bardic grade, you're a bard. However, if you remember the order, we use a general term, druids. We don't say, but you're only at. So
of
it's
course. Yeah. Thank you.
You're in. Okay, before we even get to the druid bit, your background, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
So, and it's an interesting one. When you first asked me to come on this, and I said I've only been a member of the order for such a short period, and you were encouraging me, and I said, okay, I'll trust you, of course, in this. My background is I trained as an architect. I'm a designer by inclination. I've been a designer since before I knew that's what it was, since I started coloring in my action figures as a child. And I'm interested in observing the way the world is and looking for ways to make little moments of it better. And that led me to architecture. I trained as an architect, did my 3 degrees, got qualified, and then wondered what to do next. And my career has been that of, on paper, I'm an architect. I spent a lot of time designing theaters and concert halls. So I often say that I design gathering places. I design the places where people make stories. And I mean, there's some words probably coming up here that start leading me towards Druidry, where I'm interested in, another element is my approach to architecture is very much to do with context, very much to do with where we are building, where we are living, where we exist, and our relationship to, fundamentally, it comes down to our relationship to climate and nature and what surrounds us, and historically how we built related to that. And I teach at university part-time. So it's sometimes 1 day a week, sometimes 3. It depends on my commitments. And a thing that means a lot to me is helping young designers learn how to design something that is, I don't want to say necessarily in harmony in the world. That's a great challenge, but certainly something that is sympathetic to the place. And so I've always been interested in place. And there's a term in my industry which is placemaking. People talk about making a place, and I find that challenging because um, the place already exists. It's a matter of whether you're attuned to it. It's a matter of whether you know its history. And so for me, placecraft, how we study a place, learn about a place, how we choose to change that place to work with it. Um, all of this, I think, led me at various areas of inquiries, and my most specific way to the way I arrived at the order was David Bramwell's podcast. I was listening to his adventures in Utopia. I think I said this to a couple of people at the gathering in Glastonbury this summer, and including to David himself. I was listening to his podcast, having encountered his work elsewhere, and it just said sponsored by the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. And I thought, well, if someone's sponsoring this, if someone's involved in this, I'm going to give them a go. And it's been a delight.
Great. Yes, I am a great fan of David Bramwell and his adventures in Utopia. Just brilliant. He has an amazing mind.
Well, he has a mind I feel that is appropriate for. I mean, he has an amazing mind, but with great respect to him, not that much different to many druids, bards, everyone that I've met. He has a mind that is very much aligned, I would say, with
absolutely
with this community.
And absolutely, he has a quirky way of thinking, and he spots patterns.
Yeah, that too. There we are.
And you're going to go, wow! And he makes connections with all sorts of disparate, or seemingly disparate things, and he can bring them in a magical way. And he's a great way of reflecting on various topics. It's brilliant. Now, just a comment, I'm putting it up on the thing, placecraft. I wonder if permaculture counts as placecraft. Do you have anything to say to that?
Well, I think permaculture is such a wonderfully established term. Placecraft is just, I would never call myself a permaculturalist. I'm glad to know people who are. I'm glad to know people who dedicated to their lives to place in that manner and ecosystems and environments and sustenance and just understanding in that manner. I wouldn't say permaculture counts as placecraft. I'd say placecraft counts as permaculture. I think permaculture is, to me, in my understanding, is such an all-encompassing philosophy for how we might live on this planet. And when I'm saying placecraft, it's in my small way. I'm trying to. I'm often thinking of places that are within cities or within large gatherings of humans. Whereas, I mean, probably I should just talk about permaculture, but I think that's got such connotations of how we live on the land and in the land that I'm often trying to encourage how we just change a public square, which often has insufficient space for a well-chosen permaculture intervention. Wow. That's a great question. Whoever said that, thank you. That's the right term. That's brilliant.
Now, there's a question from Sean McCann. He's got two parts, but this is the first part. There's an old saying, how you pray is what you believe. Lex orandi, lex credandi. Okay, he's showing off there with this Latin. I'd be curious to hear how you build or design embodies what you believe or practice spiritually.
I would say I realized recently that for me, I see everything in systems. I see everything as interconnected. And when I design, when I teach, I'm always trying to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture for me is the interconnected systems and ecosystems within which we exist. It is us as just one part of a larger whole. And one of the great joys in teaching is when I can help a young designer passionate about making something better, a place better. I can help them see on an order of magnitude bigger and the systems within which they're already thinking, which already exist. And I would say that's how these things are linked, in that my perspective on the on this planet on which we are lucky enough to be an expression. My perspective on that relates to my perspective on anything I might be hired to design. And I'm always trying to bring in that wider perspective and systemic approaches. I'm a member of the Systemic Design Association, and it's basically trying to think about how we deal with the fact that we live within nested, complex systems. I mean, Sean, he's coming at me with his Latin, so hopefully this is the right kind of answer he wants. Is that we live in a complex web of complex systems, all of which is interrelated. And so I suppose my philosophy is that we can't truly fix anything, that nothing is ever fixed. Obviously, the only constant is change. That's so often said, but there's also the fact that everything is always moving. It's just a matter of whether the scale at which it's moving in time and space is one that we notice, or that is relevant to us. So I think that approach, and the idea that a building is not something you finish, it's something you start, which is a saying. So it's a beautiful saying by Stuart Brand, to whom I'm hugely indebted. So I'd say, hopefully that's the answer. That's how my philosophy, I would tend towards calling it's a philosophy that has spiritual elements.
Wonderful. I'm just giving you the second half. Sean doesn't stop. Or conversely, how your design history informs your practice. Well, maybe you've already answered this now.
I think that is it. Yeah. I mean, I feel like my interest in the work of Stuart Brand, there's a book called How Buildings Learn, my involvement with the Long Now Foundation, and my interest in the bigger picture, the wider here, the longer now. That influences my approach to what materials I specify to be in a design, and also, and in terms of not just how they last for the future, but where they came from. Where, there's that thing of, anytime we build a building, really all we're doing is we're moving things from one place to another around this planet. And the question is, do we take into account how far those things have come and how far they might have to go afterwards? And it's that holistic approach that I think is important.
Oh, that's fascinating. Give me the title of that book again. I just love the title.
The book is called How Buildings Learn, and it was
it's magical.
It's great, and it's a book. He wrote it in the 90s. It was released in 2 editions, UK and American, because the UK edition was censored because Richard Rogers got upset about something he wrote, which is quite a famous architect. And it was also, I think, a BBC or Channel 4 TV show in the 90s. It's on his YouTube channel, and I think any Druid would find, not any Druid with an interest in this kind of topic would probably find they're on the same page as Stuart.
I just love How Buildings Learn, and it's like that the animation of buildings, and it's almost like sentient beings. And I mean, you can feel energies in houses, and the resonance that stone, etc., can hold.
It's that thing that, we have a tendency, or many people in our modern mechanistic world have a tendency to sort of view so many things as fixed, and to realize that, the building that I'm standing in now, this room, would have been the living room for a family 150 years ago. Hopefully, this building, which has some good character to it, will be here in another 150 years. But how will people live in it? It'll be different. It's all in motion, and this place has seen that existence. And whatever one believes about the way that is left here, whatever might come, however that all might weave together, I think it's even the most just purely materialist perspective on the world is enhanced by accepting that and acknowledging that change.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's lovely that things aren't static. I mean, I live in a house that's over 200 years old, and it's actually, where I'm in is one part of, there was a tower, and the house was built around it in 1790 or 1800. And so this is one of the second castles in which I live. My address is 3 castles, and we have a ruin, but this is one. So this is part of the tower, and then there are 2 wings to it. So it's then the walls are very thick, and it's just fascinating that this, became a residence, having once been a lived-in tower, and then was a ruin, and then
a tower of occupation,
and built around.
Was it? Sorry, a tower of what era? Is it a tower of occupation? A tower of
we're talking. Well, the tower that's there was a priest's house. It's 13th century. Sorry, it's 15th century, attached to a chapel that's 13th century.
Wow.
And then this one, I imagine, was a bit earlier than that. And then the third castle, it's on a motte and bailey. It was an Anglo-Norman settlement. There's no evidence of the tower there now, but so.
It's this sort of history of inhabitation. I mean, I know we've got many people joining this call from North America, which has such a different history of inhabitation. But it is wonderful to I find, to think back to the people who've been, to be conscious of the people who've been in these places before, over whatever time period, and also to try and put you're thinking of North American techniques, the seventh generation thinking that some Native American peoples use, of thinking back 7 generations and forward 7 generations. And there's a wonderful thing of thinking, what world might we leave for seven generations to come?
I mean, it's a fascinating and a very profound question, and a very responsible question. That so many,
I think some of us have to ask.
Yes, and so many people of influence are not actually asking or considering. It's almost like everything is in the now, which is such a pity. And I just wonder. Go on.
Go. No, you go.
You're my guest. Go on.
Oh no, you're very kind. Well, no, I was just going to say the prayer that you read at the beginning, and some of the words about peace. And there is the thing that obviously the most important thing is peace now, but actually to have a perspective on what we want to be here in a century's time can affect the manner in which we approach the idea of peace. And I think that there's that perspective, those of us who are privileged enough to live in a place where we can take the time to think that way, I do think it's some of us have to be thinking on that longer time scale in order to help all of us. And I'm actually a fan of the idea that actually a good idea for what we should consider short term should be the life of an oak tree, or the life of an oak tree. Because we should be thinking always on the time scale. It's an exercise to flex your mental muscles to think at a scale longer than the human life.
Absolutely, and the lifespan of an oak tree, brilliant. Yeah, and it is important because when people are living within the disaster, within the pain, the war, there's very little thinking, because what you are is in survival mode, and you're thinking of this moment. How do I stay alive for now? There's no room for the longer picture, and it's up to other people who are not experiencing, who can afford to really do and give a deep consideration for the long term. But it's complex, and it's not easy. But that doesn't mean it cannot be reflected upon.
Well, I mean, the world and life is complex and not easy, and it's often any easy answer. Sadly, I rarely think they hold up.
No, exactly. So I've got another question. Go on.
Yeah.
Go on.
No. I want another question. I'm enjoying it.
I really enjoyed your comment. Please go.
I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it might have been the James Hollis saying. He's a Jungian psychoanalyst who says, "Beware of those who say they've got all the answers, because they are not you. They are not you, and they are not your answers."
Absolutely. Yeah, a bit of humility can go a long way. I'm talking about genuine humility.
Absolutely.
Go a long way. Yes. There's. I forgive the interruptions, because there's a lag. We both seem to speak at the same time because of the time lag between us. So our viewers, we're not being rude to each other. It just
You're just so wonderful to talk to, Eimear. I mean, I'm just over enthusiastic. Actually, I may be being rude. I'm just being enthusiastic.
No. I was talking about me, trying to say I'm not being rude. There's a gap, or there's a time lapse. But I have a question from Arcturus Druid. Okay, we'll put this in here. Can you elaborate on the attuned sense you feel about a place? when you're working with that place and in creating that place?
So my level of attunement is, I know some people who feel hugely attuned to things. There's a my when I'm working with a place, I do tend to be, I'm quite a heady person by history, by training, this is one of the things I'm working on, is to get out of my head and into the body, and that's part of my journey. My attunement to a place tends to be to do with my knowledge of its history, my knowledge of the world, and it tends to be, I'm gonna shock. I feel I manage to do the work I do without feeling that I have any natural attunement to place. I manage to provide value and help people in my work without actually feeling that what I'm doing has much instinct or I generally feel that I generally judge that I can I can justify my reasoning for everything. It rarely feels to me, for me personally, that it comes from any sense, any sort of any instinct from my gut. And I may get to the end of my life and find out that I was kidding myself, and that's entirely possible. But the more I know about the place, the more I feel able to attune to it. And my feeling is that there are various people I've met within OBOD who have a more maybe a more natural relationship. And one of the great joys is if I can contribute in my way, in a weave a dance with those who have contributed in other ways. I wonder if that makes sense.
I think it does. And I mean, if I'm asking you to design a space for me, and I think the process is very important, but when I'm the customer and I'm looking for a particular space and you've created it, the outcome is what's important. I may be interested in how you got there, but how you got there is your journey to create a beautiful space for me. And I think by knowing the history, there is a tuning in some way, at some level, with the history of the building. You have a sensitivity to this, to the present, and then like just talking about thinking for the future in, like, for example, your flat, hoping will still be there in another 150 years. So in a sense, you are tuning in, but it's your way of tuning in. Others go, I can feel the beings and I can feel the spirits, or the walls are talking to me, or whatever it is, whatever the spirit of place. That I think we have different ways of connecting on different levels, because we have different ways of, we've got 5 senses, and there's different way, and I suppose we've more than 5 senses, but how we tune into places, and we just use them differently depending on our temperament or our makeup.
Yeah, I mean, when you say spirit of place, a term that was introduced to me when I was at university was genius loci.
Yeah.
So I'm coming back with the Latin now. So that is spirit of place, and those were the small gods of the Roman homes, home and hearth. But the term was introduced. My education as an undergraduate in the early part of the century was quite modernist, quite this is how the machines are going to make the world better, but maybe with a bit of a green roof on the top, because we're beginning to be conscious of the climate crisis, just about. But they used the genius loci as a term, and it was used by the modernists as a way to talk about all the things that didn't maybe fit into their sort of machine for living in idea of how the building works. But to me, the knowledge of an ecosystem, an environment, a climate, the way that ecosystem and climate has led has contributed to the way that a culture has grown up, the way that that culture has grown up in relation to the buildings it's made because of the plants it was surrounded by, the stone, the clay. All of this then becomes, are these, depending on whether you're trying to keep the rain out or whether you're trying to keep the heat in or the heat out, or whatever it is you're trying to do, that then leads to a different sense of the way, the roundhouses of Neolithic Britain have a different spirit of place to, to somewhere where they're having to be on stilts to keep out of the way of floodwaters. And that spirit of that place being like that for a long time will accrue. That sense of place will accrue. And as you say, how you relate to it differs. But for me, the sense of when I'm in a building like your house, when I'm in a place of great history, I start telling myself stories about it. I was in Ireland. I was in County Meath earlier this year and at the end of last year, and I was helping out with a workshop that was in a house that was a former orphanage. And when the first time we went to this orphanage, a guy on the team started feeling he could feel the sadness of this building. And he was really attuned to it, and a lot came up for him, and a lot came up for a few other men on this weekend, a few other people. They happen to be men, and then I was back there about 6 months later, and this time there was someone there who, when this story came up of how this had happened the first time people had been there, he sort of heard the stories being told, and this young man said, "My father grew up here, and this was a happy place. This was a place that he was happy to have been. It was in his life, in the troubles he'd had in making his way through his childhood. This was a place that he was proud to have grown up here, and he was proud that his son was coming back to help out on something that was taking place, and this place was being used in a different way. And I thought that was interesting because there was nothing untrue about the ways that the story of this place had brought things up for the people the first time. Mm-hmm. There'd been value in that for them in their journey. But there was also value in realizing that the things that had come up for them, they disappeared when some truth came through. I mean, both can be true.
Yes, that's true.
And,
that's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I have a question from John King. Now, John's a retired architect. How do you navigate the conflict between your concepts and the realities of the commercial world?
Painfully, John. The things that I'm saying, this idea that a building isn't something you finish, it's something you start, but a building contract is something you finish. A building contract is something you absolutely finish, and there's a point where you legally hand it over. I don't have employees. I work solo as a design consultant. I collaborate with people, and I'm lucky enough that so far enough people have been interested in what I do that I've been able to make my way this far in the world while finding ways to be of value through some of this work. When I was younger, I definitely worked for practices that I was just trying to pay my dues and trying to learn how to build buildings, and my work is not just as an architect. I do work as a design consultant. I work with theatre companies. I work with, here's something that'll be interesting to see what Druids think about, is I spent a couple of years helping design gathering places in virtual reality, which was a fascinating thing to do with how we gather, when we were talking, earlier this week, and I was talking about how Zoom works versus how it doesn't when we're not breathing the same air, when we're not in the same place. But, virtual reality, there are ways in which you think you are in the same place. You're not. Is it different and better to this? I don't know. But so I find, John, that there are sometimes I just have to make the thing work. I mean, particularly there are times when I'm working on something truly that I think can be truly impactful, and the budget's tight, and something it becomes sometimes it becomes a toss up between can we provide this community service versus can we make sure that the materials we're sourcing are sourced from the right place and absolutely sustainable, and it becomes a choice. It's the gritty reality of trying to provide something people need while also trying to provide it in the planet, and so in a way that the planet can sustain, and that's hard. I'm a big believer of in Kate Rayworth's donut economics, where I mean how the struggle we have with how we maintain quality of life for humans while maintaining the planetary boundaries of what we can manage, and that's hard.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember meeting a woman years ago who was so sensitive, felt that she couldn't walk on grass because she was going to destroy it, and
Wow.
just became so that that our presence on the earth is so intrusive that it was very, very painful. And we aren't, but every being on this land, on this earth, is intrusive. Every animal. We all, have some impact. If you're eating something, you've taken something away. And it's about that balance. And I suppose mindfully doing it or giving thanks or whatever it is, we have an impact. But even reflecting on it rather than doing it in an empty-headed way, I think is a huge difference.
There's yeah, I have to say I definitely spent a fair amount of my life feeling that humanity was something of a curse on this planet. I certainly spent enough time where I was so appalled by the evils I saw being perpetrated by humans, and humans as the only conscious beings that we know of in the manner that is right through science, in the manner that we are. That therefore we were the only evil things because we were the only ones conscious of these things. I think I've come around to a way of thinking. I'm glad to say relatively recently that I'm with Carl Sagan on that we are ways for the cosmos to know itself, and our relationship with all these things. We are in relationship with all of it, and it's, as you say, it's about being conscious about our place there. And I mean, if she can thank the grass for walking on it, I mean, it's grass. It's going to continue in its grassness. That's one of the reasons grass is so successful, is that it's able to be walked on.
And some grass needs to be walked on to survive. And stuff. Robin Wall-Kimmerer,
Braiding Sweetgrass. Yes, wonderful book.
She says sweetgrass needs to be harvested in order for it to survive.
Well, there's absolutely, yeah. There are so many environments which what rewilding is a wonderful thing to be done in various places of the planet. But I do some once a year. I help re-chalk the White Horse of Uffington, which is chalk down. Yes, so we do that each summer with the National Trust Rangers. I take a group down there, and we do it as a sort of secular pilgrimage. And for people who are, basically are interested in how we maintain what we have and how we help things last. And one of the rangers says there is that if you rewild a chalk downland, you lose the habitat for these various animals that have lived there for thousands of years. That actually, while we could do with rewilding a lot and getting rid of various parts of industrial agriculture, it's as with all of this stuff, it's all more complex, and actually, there are we do have our place if we're conscious within these relationships, within these ecosystems.
And I mean, that's a really interesting point you make, that if you try to restore something, and it may not be restoring, but like rewilding has a huge impact on
when do you restore to?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's the story of Stirling Castle. When I don't know if you've heard this, when
no, go on.
when they were restoring it in the 90s, and they found they found a patch of the paint that it had originally been painted with. And so they did a public consultation and they put the sort of little whiteboards up in a place, and not that many people came to see it. And they said, right, this is what we're going to do. And they covered it up and they restored it. And when they took the covering down, it was bright yellow. And the reason it was bright yellow is that was the color it had been, whatever, 600 years ago. It had been bright yellow. But everyone who'd grown up around this castle was used to it being grey, because that's the color it had been as being a garrison. And so it's this thing that the problem with when you try to restore something is, when do you restore it to? And it is, you know, it's one of the wonderful things that happens with building restoration these days, is how they try where they can to maintain the stories that went into the creation of that building and how it got to. So when you do restore things, it's, you know, what do we, and that's always a dialogue as well, because in 200 years time, someone may turn around and say, well, you know, this 1960s flat roofed addition to this house, well, this is part of its history, we must keep it because that's the way they did things in the 20th century. It's amazing what becomes a historic relic if you leave it long enough.
And of course, there's so much architecture in the 20th century that we don't like. You think, well, a lot of it isn't sustainable. Buildings don't last. And where the house that you're living in lasted, this one has. And then so many other more modern buildings don't. And why would you want, there's that dilemma, but this is part of the history. And I'm sure people, when this was built, people may have criticized the architecture of it.
But we do also have the survivorship bias, which is that we look at the old buildings that lasted and we think, why didn't we build them like that back then? Well, we built some of them like that back then. There are other ones that fell down, and those ones
we didn't see them. Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't see them. So but there is the fact that, yes, there were some, you know, a lot of that mid-20th century modern idea around buildings where they suddenly thought, well, here's the answer. Here's they were trying to sweep away all the horrors that had caused the First World War and make a cleaner, better world. They got some things wrong. And one of the things about modernity is you get things wrong on a larger scale and faster than we did before, which allows you to cock things up on a far larger. Pardon, sorry.
It's okay, you're adults.
But it is you know, a lot of those buildings that we hate so much now were built with both great ambition and hope, and of course hubris. And I would love to say the same won't be taking place right now, but I imagine it is.
Okay. Wow. Okay, Arcturus, Druid, that does make sense. It feels very harmonic. Thank you. I'm also in my head a lot, which is why Druidry resonates. Wonderful. So we're going to be heading over to the Druid Heart soon. Sorry, Liz, putting that up. That was an accident. So apologies for those of you who are watching who haven't yet been invited onto the Druid Heart, but we will be moving soon. So I'm really, really enjoying this conversation, and people are really enjoying it too.
Oh, good. Hello, Ricky.
Oh, yes, and Ferdi is here as well. Both have said hello to you.
Hello, Ferdi. Hello.
The entire picture, Sylvia says, the walls are talking to us. I sympathize. So many kingdoms in the spirit of place partake. Genii, loci, plants, water, minerals, wind, sun, grades, geography, etc. It's really interesting talking about the genius loci. We had at a winter gathering a number of years ago a psychiatrist from Iceland. He gave a presentation. And one of the things that stood out for me from him was he was saying that in Iceland, in law, spirit of place are protected, that you cannot change a place name. If you do, you will offend the spirit of place. And I thought, wow. And I can identify it and resonate with that because our place names were translated into English by our colonial masters. And some were translated accurately, you know, from Irish into English. So you know it's a direct translation. Others were just phoneticized. And others, they put a completely different name on it. And when you see our road signs, and you've seen, are in Irish and English. And when you look, so the English will give you'll have no sense of what it is. There's a place called Newtown Forbes in County Longford. I think there must have been, there was the name of a big house, some landowners that lived there. But the Irish for it is on Lisbrack. Now, Lis is a fort, sometimes it's a little fairy mound. Brack means speckled, or it means trout, or it means enchanted. So if you're going to look at the name of this small village is the Enchanted Fort. And what is it called? Newtown Forbes. That doesn't have any meaning for most people. And we have lots and lots of beautiful Irish place names, but people don't understand what they mean. And yet, and I think it must offend the spirit of place. So I get quite, I'm nerdy, and I bore people if I'm driving along. Oh, do you know what that means? That means this, or.
Go for a road trip, I love it.
So you find, oh, there were sacred trees in this place because villa or villi or vill is in the English name, and that is an anglicization of billa, which billa is the Irish for sacred tree, and it's just fascinating, you know. Exactly. So lots of comments here. Sorry.
Depth of meaning and understanding. Your knowledge enriches your relationship with place.
Exactly. Oh my God, there's loads of points here, and we need to finish. I said, John, we see them across? Sorry, we'll have to go across, but these comments won't go with us. And Pat says, we are how the planet talks to itself. To heal the planet, we heal ourselves. Absolutely, Pat. I think it has to start here. It's not either or, but it's, if you can't start with yourself, it's very hard to radiate outwards. John says, we see the interactions of life here on a daily basis. We currently have a buzzard hanging around us that's trying to rob the nest of jays of its youngs to feed its own. You know, there's all that tension within nature, and it's part of it. Okay, wait a second. Sending my love and peace and respect to all here. Thank you for bringing us together. Now, it's interesting. Maybe we can do that on the hearth. When you were talking about why people gather. So I think I will leave it there. And for those of you who are members of the order, move over to the hearth. For those of you who can't, solstice blessings to you. And we'll be having our online solstice ceremony this Saturday at 7 p.m. UK time. So for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, the blessings of the winter solstice while we are enjoying the longest day. The longest day. That's right. So until we meet you again, Slán go fóill, and for the rest of you, we'll meet you over in the hearth. So